Imagine waking up in a world where every single day is a fight for survival. No cities, no roads, no houses, only endless forests, towering mountains, dangerous rivers, and wild predators. This was Africa 2.5 million years ago, a place where only the strongest survived. Deep within this untamed wilderness lived a small prehistoric tribe. They hunted with sharpened stone spears, gathered roots and berries, and depended entirely on nature for survival. Every member of the tribe followed strict rules, and anyone who disobeyed them faced severe punishment. Among them was a young girl unlike the others. She was brave, intelligent, and endlessly curious about the mysterious world beyond her tribe. While others accepted their lives without question, she dreamed of freedom. She wanted to explore the distant mountains, discover hidden valleys, and learn what existed beyond the endless horizon. But the tribe believed her curiosity was dangerous. They feared she would bring misfortune upon them or reveal their secrets to rival tribes. To stop her from leaving, they imprisoned her inside a rough wooden cage built from thick tree trunks and bound tightly with strong vines. Day after day, she sat behind the wooden bars, watching birds fly freely through the sky while she remained trapped. Days turned into weeks. She never stopped searching for a way out. She carefully studied every crack in the wood, every loose vine, and every weakness in the cage. She knew that one day an opportunity would come, and when it did, she would risk everything for freedom. Then, one unforgettable night, nature changed everything. Dark storm clouds swallowed the sky. Powerful winds shook the giant trees. Thunder roared across the mountains, and brilliant flashes of lightning illuminated the forest. Rain poured down in torrents, turning the ground into deep mud. Suddenly, a massive dead tree, weakened by the storm, crashed directly onto the cage. The impact shattered several wooden bars. The hunters moved swiftly through the forest, their sharp eyes scanning every footprint pressed into the wet earth. Broken branches, disturbed leaves, and faint marks in the mud told them exactly where the girl had gone. They had tracked dangerous animals for years, and they believed catching one frightened girl would be easy. But they were wrong. Far ahead, the girl continued running without looking back. Her feet were scratched by sharp stones and thorny bushes, yet she refused to stop. Every breath grew heavier, every step more painful, but the thought of returning to the cage filled her with even greater fear. The forest around her was alive. Colorful birds flew between ancient trees. Monkeys screamed from the branches above. Insects buzzed through the humid air, while distant roars echoed across the valley. Somewhere nearby, a giant predator was hunting. The girl slowed down and carefully listened. The jungle suddenly became silent. She had learned from watching the hunters that silence often meant danger. Slowly, she stepped behind a massive fallen tree. Moments later, a huge, saber-toothed cat emerged from the tall grass. Its powerful muscles rippled beneath its thick fur as it searched for prey. Its long fangs glistened in the morning light. The girl held her breath. The predator sniffed the air, looked around cautiously, and walked only a few feet away from her hiding place. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared the animal could hear it. After what felt like forever, the giant cat disappeared back into the forest. She waited several more seconds before quietly continuing her escape. Meanwhile, the hunters reached the place where the predator had passed. One hunter pointed at the enormous paw prints pressed deep into the mud. The leader frowned. He knew they were no longer chasing only the escaped girl. Now, they were entering the hunting grounds of one of the deadliest predators in prehistoric Africa. Still, turning back was not an optio. The girl tightened her grip on the ancient stone knife as she stepped cautiously out of the hidden cave. The sun was beginning to sink behind the distant mountains, painting the sky with shades of orange and crimson. Night was approaching, and in the prehistoric wilderness, darkness brought a new level of danger. She knew she couldn't stay in one place for long. The hunters were still searching. As she climbed higher along a narrow mountain trail, she noticed broken branches and fresh footprints ahead. They weren't hers. Someone, or something, had passed through only moments earlier. She slowly moved forward, listening to every sound around her. Suddenly, a deep growl echoed through the valley. From behind a cluster of ancient bushes emerged a massive cave bear. Standing on its hind legs, the giant beast towered over her, its thick fur covered in dust and scars from countless battles. It sniffed the air, locking its eyes onto the frightened girl. She froze. Running would only trigger the bear to chase her. Remembering how hunters distracted dangerous animals, she slowly reached down, picked up a small stone, and threw it toward a nearby cliff. The rock struck the stone wall with a loud crack. The bear instantly turned its head toward the sound. Without wasting a second, the girl slipped quietly behind the trees and disappeared into the forest. But her escape came with an unexpected consequence. The girl backed away from the river, her heart racing after the crocodile's sudden attack. Every part of her body trembled, but she knew she couldn't stay there. The hunters were still following her trail, and every second she wasted brought them closer. She turned and disappeared into the thick forest once again. The sun climbed higher, filling the jungle with unbearable heat. Sweat covered her face as she struggled through tangled vines and towering ferns. Strange sounds echoed from every direction. Some belonged to birds, others to animals she had never seen before. Suddenly, she heard voices. The hunters. They were closer than ever. She quickly climbed onto a large rock and looked through the trees. In the distance, several hunters were moving carefully, examining broken branches and footprints left in the soft ground. One of them suddenly stopped. He pointed directly toward the trail she had just used. The leader nodded. They knew exactly where she was heading. The girl jumped down and ran faster than before. Her breathing became heavier. Her legs felt weak, but fear gave her the strength to keep moving. After hours of running, she reached a narrow canyon surrounded by towering cliffs. There was only one way through. As she carefully entered the rocky passage, a loud rumbling sound echoed above her. Small stones began rolling down the cliffs. She looked up. A herd of enormous prehistoric wild bison was charging across the ridge. The ground shook violently beneath her feet. Within seconds, rocks began crashing into the canyon. Without thinking, she sprinted forward as giant boulders smashed into the ground behind her. Dust filled the air, making it impossible to see. One massive rock landed directly behind her, blocking the entrance. When the dust finally settled, the hunters reached the canyon. Their path was completely blocked. The leader slammed his spear against the fallen rocks in frustration. For the first time since the chase, the powerful current spun her through the dark water, pulling her beneath the surface. She struggled to breathe as sharp rocks scraped against her arms and legs. For a terrifying moment, she thought she would never see daylight again. Then, suddenly, the current threw her toward the riverbank. She grabbed the roots of a fallen tree with all her remaining strength and slowly pulled herself onto the muddy shore. Gasping for air, she collapsed on the ground, completely exhausted. High above the cliff, the hunters searched the rushing river. The tribe's leader stared into the darkness. No one could have survived a fall like that, or so they believed. Convinced that the river had claimed her life, the hunters finally turned back, disappearing into the night. For the first time since her escape, the girl was truly free. As dawn broke across the prehistoric landscape, golden sunlight spread over the valley. Birds began singing, and the cool morning breeze carried the scent of wild flowers through the forest. The girl slowly opened her eyes. She had survived, despite her injuries and exhaustion. She stood up and looked toward the distant mountains. She knew her journey was far from over. She still needed food. She still needed shelter. And she still had to survive in a world filled with predators. While searching the forest, she discovered wild berries growing near a rocky hillside. She remembered watching the elders carefully choose safe plants, avoiding poisonous ones. She gathered only the berries she recognized and continued walking until she reached a small cave hidden behind a waterfall. Inside, the cave was dry and safe. Using dry grass, fallen branches, and 2 smooth stones she had collected along the way. She carefully struck the rocks together. Again and again, tiny sparks appeared. Finally, a small flame burst to life. For the first time in her life, she had made her own fire. She smiled as the warmth filled the cave. The smoke grew thicker as the girl climbed the last rocky hill before sunset. Every step filled her with hope, but also fear. She had escaped one tribe, but she knew nothing about the people waiting ahead. Would they welcome her, or would they become her next enemies? She crouched behind a cluster of bushes and quietly observed the camp below. Unlike the tribe she had escaped from, these people seemed different. Children laughed as they played beside a small stream. Women prepared food over carefully built stone fire pits. Hunters returned from the forest carrying antelope meat, sharing it with everyone instead of keeping it for themselves. The girl had never seen a tribe living this way. For a long time, she simply watched. Then, as she stepped forward, a dry branch snapped beneath her foot. Crack! Within seconds, several hunters turned toward the sound. Stone spears were raised. The camp fell silent. The girl slowly lifted her empty hands to show that she carried no weapon. The tribe's leader, an older man with gray hair and countless battle scars, stepped forward. His eyes studied her carefully. He noticed the cuts on her feet, the bruises on her arms, and the fear in her eyes. He understood. She wasn't a threat. She was a survivor. Instead of attacking, he lowered his spear and offered her a piece of roasted meat and a container of fresh water. For the first time in many months, tears filled the girl's eyes. She had expected violence. Instead, she found kindness. Over the following weeks, the new tribe slowly accepted her as one of their own. They taught her better ways to hunt, how to shape stronger stone blades, and how to build shelters that could withstand heavy storms. She shared everything she had learned during her escape. How to avoid crocodile-filled rivers, how to recognize the tracks of saber-toothed cats, and how to survive alone in the wilderness. Her story inspired everyone. But far away, the tribe she had escaped had not. Several weeks passed, and life in the new tribe slowly became peaceful. The girl was no longer treated as an outsider. She had earned everyone's respect through her courage, intelligence, and determination. Every day, she learned new survival skills, and every night she sat around the campfire listening to stories told by the elders. One morning, while collecting berries near the edge of the forest, she noticed something unusual. Fresh footprints. They were larger than those of anyone in her new tribe. She knelt beside them, her heart pounding. She recognized the pattern immediately. They belonged to the hunters from her old tribe. Without wasting a second, she rushed back to the village. "The hunters are coming," she warned. At first, some people doubted her, but the experienced chief examined the tracks himself and nodded. "She is right." The entire village sprang into action. Hunters sharpened their stones, spears, and axes. Women gathered the children and elderly into hidden caves. Young warriors carried heavy logs to block the narrow paths leading into the valley. Everyone prepared for what could become the greatest battle of their lives. As sunset painted the sky red, shadows appeared at the edge of the forest. The furious hunters had arrived. Their leader stepped forward, gripping his spear tightly. His eyes locked onto the girl, standing beside her new family. He pointed his weapon toward her. "You belong to us," his expression seemed to say. The girl took one step forward. She was no longer the frightened prisoner who had escaped a broken cage. She was stronger now, braver, and she refused to go back. The leader let out a thunderous roar. The attack began. Spears flew through the air as warriors from both tribes charged across the open ground. Stone axes collided with wooden clubs. Dust rose into the evening sky while echoes of battle spread through the valley. The girl fought beside her new tribe, using the stone knife she had discove. The ground shook with incredible force as the volcano continued to erupt. Rivers of glowing lava flowed down the mountainside, swallowing ancient forests that had stood for thousands of years. Thick clouds of ash covered the sky, turning bright daylight into an eerie darkness. The girl ran as fast as she could, leading both tribes through a narrow canyon she had discovered during her escape weeks earlier. Behind them, flaming trees crashed to the ground. The air was filled with smoke, making it difficult to breathe. Children cried. Parents carried the elderly on their shoulders. Even the strongest hunters struggled to keep moving. For the first time, enemies were no longer fighting each other. They were fighting together against nature itself. As they reached the end of the canyon, another disaster struck. A massive herd of frightened mammoths came charging toward them. The enormous animals were fleeing from the volcanic fire, shaking the earth with every step. "There's no time," one hunter shouted. The girl quickly looked around. To the left was a steep cliff. To the right was a dense forest already burning. Then she noticed a narrow passage between two giant boulders. Only people could fit through it. The mammoths were far too large. She waved her arms and shouted for everyone to follow her. One by one, the survivors squeezed through the rocky passage just seconds before the mammoths thundered past, missing them by only a few feet. When the danger had passed, everyone looked at the girl in amazement. Her quick thinking had saved dozens of lives. The leader of her former tribe slowly walked toward her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, in a gesture no one expected, he lowered his spear and bowed his head. He realized the truth. The girl he had once imprisoned had become the very person who saved his people. Pride and anger had nearly destroyed them all, but courage and compassion had given them another chance. The two trib. The girl who had once been known only as the escaped prisoner was now respected as one of the wisest leaders her people had ever known. Children gathered around the evening campfires to hear the incredible story of how she had survived the broken cage, escaped the furious hunters, and united two rival tribes during nature's greatest disaster. But she always told them the same lesson. Never let fear decide your future. Under her guidance, the tribe changed in remarkable ways. Instead of competing for food, families worked together during hunts. Experienced hunters taught the younger generation how to track animals without unnecessary risk. Gatherers discovered new edible plants, while skilled toolmakers crafted sharper stone blades and stronger wooden spears. Knowledge was no longer kept secret. It was shared. Every generation became stronger than the one before it. One clear evening, the girl climbed the highest hill overlooking the valley. The stars stretched across the sky brighter than ever before. She remembered the lonely nights when she had hidden in caves, unsure whether she would survive until sunrise. Now, she looked down at a peaceful community. Children laughed around the fire. Hunters returned safely from successful expeditions. Families ate together beneath the open sky. The fear that had once controlled her life was gone. She smiled quietly. Far away, the old wooden cage had long since rotted away, reclaimed by the forest. Vines covered its broken remains, and young trees grew through the cracked wooden bars. Nature had erased the prison, but it had preserved the lesson. Freedom is stronger than fear. As the years turned into decades, the girl grew old. Her hair turned gray, and the scars on her hands reminded her of every challenge she had overcome. Before her final days, she gathered the children of the tribe one last time. She pointed toward the endless horizon. One day, she said softly, "Your children and their children." The years continued to pass, and the once frightened girl became an elder whose wisdom guided every decision her people made. Whenever disagreements arose, she reminded everyone of the terrible days when hatred had nearly destroyed them. Her story was no longer just a memory. It had become the foundation of a new way of life. The united tribe grew larger with every passing season. They built stronger shelters from wood and stone, stored food for harsh times, and explored territories no one had dared to enter before. Young hunters learned not only how to chase prey, but also how to protect one another. The greatest lesson was simple. No one survives alone. One spring morning, the girl led a group of young explorers to the top of a massive cliff overlooking the endless African plains. Herds of antelope stretched across the grasslands. Elephants moved slowly toward distant rivers, and birds filled the sky. She smiled and said, "Look carefully. This land doesn't belong to us. We belong to it. Respect nature, and it will give you life. Fight against it, and it will remind you how small you truly are. Those words stayed with the young generation forever. As decades passed, the tribe became known for its courage, kindness, and unity. As seasons changed and years passed, the united tribe continued to grow stronger. Children who had once hidden in fear were now skilled hunters, careful gatherers, and fearless explorers. They learned from every mistake their ancestors had made. The forests around them also changed. Young trees grew where wildfires had once burned. Rivers carved new paths through the land. Herds of prehistoric animals migrated with the changing climate, forcing humans to adapt once again. The tribe understood one important truth. Survival belonged not to the strongest, but to those who could adapt. The girl encouraged everyone to observe nature closely. She taught them to watch the birds before a storm arrived. She showed them how animal tracks could reveal hidden water sources. She explained that every sound in the forest carried a message, whether it was a warning of predators or the promise of nearby food. Slowly, knowledge became more valuable than strength. The tribe invented better hunting strategies. Instead of chasing animals alone, they worked together. Some hunters guided prey toward narrow valleys, while others waited with sharpened spears. Every successful hunt fed the entire community. No family was left hungry. As time passed, the children began asking the elder woman about the broken cage. She never spoke with anger. Instead, she smiled gently and said, "That cage did not make me weak. It taught me how precious freedom truly is." Those words were repeated by every generation that followed. Far beyond the valley, new groups of early humans were beginning their own journeys across ancient Africa. Some crossed dangerous rivers. Others climbed towering mountains. Many disappeared forever. But those who survived carried with them the same determination that had once driven one frightened girl to escape into the unknown. Humanity was slowly changing. Curiosity replaced fear. Cooperation replaced conflict. Hope replaced despair. As thousands of, protected by towering cliffs, dense forests, and a winding river, it offered safety that few places could. Herds of grazing animals returned every season, fruit trees flourished, and fresh water flowed throughout the year. For the first time in generations, families could think about more than simply surviving the next day. The girl, now one of the tribe's most respected leaders, believed that the future belonged to the children. Every morning, she gathered the young members of the tribe before sunrise. Instead of teaching them only how to hunt, she taught them how to observe. She showed them how the wind changed before storm. She explained why birds suddenly became silent when predators were nearby. She taught them to recognize fresh footprints, broken branches, and the smallest signs left behind by animals. "Nature speaks," she would tell them. "You only have to learn how to listen." The children learned quickly. Some became expert trackers. Others became skilled tool makers. A few discovered the safest paths through forests and mountains, making travel easier for everyone. The tribe grew wiser with every passing season. One afternoon, while exploring beyond the northern cliffs, a group of young hunters discovered something remarkable. Hidden beneath layers of rock was a vast cave unlike any they had ever seen. Inside were ancient drawings covering the walls. Large mammoths, powerful saber-toothed cats, early hunters carrying stone spears, and mysterious handprints left by people who had lived there countless generations before. The children ran back to the village, excited by their discovery. The elder woman smiled as she entered the cave. She carefully touched one of the faded handprints. Someone had stood in that exact place thousands of years earlier. Someone who had also struggled to survive. Someone who had also hoped their story would never be forgotten. That evening, the tribe gathered inside the cave. Using charcoal from the sea, many years passed, and the hidden valley was no longer a small settlement. It had become a thriving homeland where families lived in peace. Children grew into skilled hunters, and wisdom was valued as highly as strength. The lessons of the brave girl had shaped an entire generation. But nature never remained the same for long. One year, the rainy season arrived late. The rivers that had always flowed with clear water began to shrink. Green grass slowly turned yellow beneath the scorching African sun. Fruit trees produced fewer berries, and the great herds of antelope, zebras, and mammoths started moving north in search of fresh grazing lands. The tribe watched with growing concern. Without the animals, there would be little food. Without water, even the strongest people would not survive. One evening, the elders gathered around the largest campfire the tribe had ever built. Hunters, gatherers, mothers, fathers, and children sat together in complete silence. The oldest hunter stood and pointed toward the distant horizon. "The land is changing," he said. "If we stay here, the valley that once gave us life may become our greatest danger." Everyone turned to the brave woman who had once escaped the broken cage. She slowly stood, looking across the faces of the people she loved. She remembered her own journey into the unknown many years before. Then she spoke calmly. "Our ancestors survived because they were willing to move forward. If we fear the unknown, we will lose everything. But if we walk together, we can find a new home." At sunrise the next morning, the tribe prepared for the greatest journey in its history. Families packed stone tools, animal skins, dried meat, and precious fire embers protected inside hollow pieces of wood. Parents lifted young children onto their shoulders. The strongest hunters walked at the front, while experienced gatherers stayed near the back to protect everyone. As the first rays of sunlight touched the valley, the Popi, the tribe walked toward the rising sun, leaving their footprints across the endless African landscape. None of them realized that those simple footsteps were the beginning of one of the greatest journeys in the history of humankind. Generation after generation, the children who had followed the brave girl grew into leaders of their own families. They carried with them the lessons of courage, cooperation, and survival. They taught their children how to read the land, how to respect the animals they hunted, and how to protect one another when danger appeared. As the years passed, those lessons spread far beyond a single tribe. New groups of early humans explored distant valleys, crossed powerful rivers, and climbed mountains that no one had ever dared to climb before. They discovered new food sources, developed stronger stone tools, and found better ways to work together. Knowledge became humanity's greatest weapon. It was stronger than claws, sharper than any spear, more powerful than fear. The elder woman, now very old, often sat beside the evening fire watching the youngest children play. Their laughter echoed through the valley, replacing the sounds of war and fear that had once filled her childhood. One curious child approached her and asked, "Were you ever afraid?" She smiled softly. "Every day," she replied. "Courage does not mean you never feel fear. Courage means taking the next step, even when fear walks beside you." The children never forgot those words. One peaceful evening, as the sun slowly disappeared behind the mountains, the elder climbed the same hill where she had once looked toward an uncertain future. She stood quietly, watching the wind move through the tall grass. The mammoths still wandered across the plains. Birds still circled high above the cliffs. The rivers still carried life through the valley. Nature had changed, and so had humanity. She closed her eyes and remembered everything. The broken cage, the desperate ES. The story of the brave girl was no longer just a memory. It had become a legend. Around every campfire, elders shared her journey with the next generation. Children listened in silence, imagining the broken cage, the furious hunters, the raging river, and the endless wilderness that had tested her courage. As the seasons passed, those children grew into adults. They became hunters, gatherers, leaders, and protectors. Each one carried a small piece of her wisdom into the future. The tribe continued to evolve. Their stone tools became sharper and more effective. They learned to work together during dangerous hunts, surrounding large animals instead of chasing them alone. They built stronger shelters using wood, branches, and stone, protecting their families from storms and predators. Every year brought new challenges. Long periods of drought forced them to travel farther for water. Heavy rains transformed dry valleys into rushing rivers. Wildfires changed entire forests overnight. Yet the tribe survived, not because they were the strongest, but because they learned to adapt. That simple ability, to learn from experience, became humanity's greatest gift. The elder woman often reminded the children, "The world will always change. If you change with it, you will survive." Those words echoed through countless generations. Slowly, small groups began leaving the valley to explore distant lands. Some traveled across endless grasslands. Others disappeared into thick forests or climbed rocky mountains, searching for safer places to live. With every journey, they discovered something new: different plants, different animals, different ways of surviving. Knowledge spread from tribe to tribe like the light of a campfire passing through the darkness. Thousands of years later, early humans would continue moving across Africa, then beyond Africa, into lands no one had ever imagined. Across deserts, through frozen valleys, over towering mountain ranges. The forest had reclaimed the old hunting grounds. Trees had grown over forgotten trails, rivers had changed their course, and the winds had erased the footprints of those who once chased her. But one thing remained: the spirit of survival. Every child born into the united tribe grew up hearing the story of the brave girl who had chosen freedom over fear. They didn't know exactly how every event had happened, but they understood the lesson behind it. Never stop believing in tomorrow. As the years passed, the tribe became more organized than ever before. Experienced hunters trained the younger generation before their first hunt. Gatherers taught children which plants could heal wounds and which berries were dangerous. Elders shared stories around the fire, passing down knowledge that no stone tool could ever replace. Knowledge became their greatest treasure. One crisp morning, the tribe watched as a group of teenagers prepared for their first journey beyond the valley. The elder woman handed the youngest explorer a smooth stone knife. It was the very same knife she had discovered years ago inside the hidden cave. She smiled and said, "This knife is not powerful because it is sharp. It is powerful because it reminds us that every problem has a solution if we are willing to look for it." The young explorers nodded with determination. As they disappeared beyond the horizon, the elder knew something extraordinary. The future no longer belonged to one tribe. It belonged to humanity. Generations continued to pass. The descendants of those early people explored new lands, crossed mighty rivers, and adapted to changing climates. Some settled near lakes. Others followed migrating animals across endless plains. Every journey brought new ideas. Every challenge created stronger survivors. And with each passing generation, humans became a little wiser than those before them. One evening, as the elder watched the setting sun, a little girl sat beside her. The story of the girl who escaped the broken cage slowly faded into the distant past, but the choices she made continued to shape the future in ways no one could have imagined. Generations came and went. Children became parents. Parents became elders. The world around them continued to change. The climate grew colder in some places and warmer in others. Rivers carved new paths through the land. Forests expanded and disappeared, and enormous animals migrated across continents in search of food. Once again, humanity was forced to adapt. And adapt they did. Early humans learned to build stronger shelters against powerful storms. They crafted sharper stone tools, discovered safer hunting techniques, and formed larger communities where knowledge was shared instead of hidden. Every generation added something new. One generation perfected hunting. The next improved tools. Another discovered better ways to protect fire. Little by little, human intelligence became the greatest force in nature. The descendants of the brave girl continued their journey across Africa. Some followed rivers into unknown valleys. Others crossed vast grasslands filled with mammoths, giant buffalo, and dangerous predators. Many never returned, but those who survived carried hope into places where no human had walked before. The spirit of exploration could no longer be stopped. One clear night, a young boy looked up at the stars and asked his grandmother, "What lies beyond those lights?" She smiled. "One day," she whispered, "our descendants may find out." No one around the campfire realized how extraordinary those words would become. Thousands and hundreds of thousands, and eventually millions of years would pass. Humanity would continue to grow. People would learn to farm the land, build villages, create languages, and form great civilizations. Ships would cross mighty